Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com, how to make a kitchen knife. Now in this video, we're going to show you how to make, or how I made, this kitchen knife out of AEB-L stainless steel. The knife also incorporates Celtic etching on the blade, as well as a very unique handle made by Pete Knife Works. It's actually pieces of a woolly mammoth molar embedded in resin. Now AEB-L stainless is one of the new super stainless steels. It mimics the hardness of high carbon steel, edge retention. It's fairly easy to work with and has excellent rust resistance. A closer look at the handle once they're polished up. I was very happy with the way the handles came out. Really makes this particular knife kind of pop off the page. So that's the finished blade, and now I'll show you where it started. It started with a 2-inch wide piece of AEB-L stainless. I cut out the basic shape on a bandsaw. And then I finished shaping that just on my 2x72 grinder. Just smoothed out all of the outline edges. And that's basically what I ended up with. At this point, I've also drilled 2 1/4-inch holes through the handles for the pinholes. And now I'm going to go over, this is a Oregon Blade Maker 2x72 with a 2 horsepower motor. I've scribed 2 railroad track lines or center lines on the edge of the blade. I'll be watching those as I do all of the grinds. Now this is my first time ever doing a full flat grind on a kitchen knife. What I've done is I've put a work table on the 2x72 grinder just so that I can use it as a rest. And I'm laying that blade up onto the belt at just a slight angle. And then I'm going to look at how much material I removed. And then I'm going to go back and I'm just going to constantly chase that ridge line until it's completely gone and I'm actually grinding flat. Now it's a slow process. I'm using a coarse grit belt. This is a number 36 grit. And the thought here is that you really want to grind with a very rough belt so that you don't generate that much heat. You'll remove material faster and you won't build up a tremendous amount of heat with a coarse belt. So now you can see that ridge line moving up the blade. And I'm just going to take my time. I don't really want the belt touching the spine of the knife at this point at all. I just really want to work my way slowly until it's flat. Another angle. And I'm really now getting to the point that the first side is almost there. It's almost completely flat. I tried to do this freehanding at first, and I just wasn't steady enough. Some people can do it. Just this work rest really made all the difference in the world. So that's one side with a rough ground, full flat grind. Take a close look at that work table that I've got. You see that I actually notched it so it fits around the belt. And this way, there's no way that that knife is going to get sucked down and jammed in between the table and the belt. So now that one side's done, I'm going to flip over and basically just do the exact same thing on the other side. The whole time that I'm doing this, I'm watching those 2 scribed lines, my center lines. That's really going to dictate how thick the blade is going to be at the edge. And I'm going to leave it a little on the heavy side before heat treating. I'm going to do my final grinding and final polishing after the blade is heat treated. You can also notice that I've mounted a light on my grinder. I have old eyes, so I need that light accommodation. But a good work light is always recommended, especially when you're trying to really keep an eye on that scribe lines. So now I'm just chasing that ridge line on the other side. This video is going to be just a little bit longer than my regular videos because this knife has a lot going on. It's got, the full flat grinds, which take a little bit longer, really because I haven't ever done them before. And then I'm going to do some blade etching on it, and then of course work on those scales. And I'm not showing it, but I'm dipping this blade into water to cool it off, every 1 or 2 passes. And now I'm pretty much there. So the other side is now, completely flat. I am going to just change belts. I moved over onto a coarse Scotch-Brite belt just to reduce those real deep grind marks from the 36 grit belt, just to reduce them a little bit before hardening. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to sand this blade after the hardening process. So I just want to really just get a head start on it. Now, I hadn't originally planned on putting brass bolsters on this blade, but because it was coming out so good, I decided to add bolsters. I would normally have drilled these 2 1/8 inch pinholes for the bolsters prior to doing any of the grinding, but in this case, I did it after the rough grinding. And now the blade is rough ground and ready for heat treating. Now stainless steel is a little bit different to heat treat. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but it basically gets wrapped up in a stainless steel foil. You fold over the edges, double folds, and tap them closed, and has to be almost airtight foil envelope. And then it goes into a heat treating oven for the temperature, the exact temperature and the exact duration. And then it gets plate quenched so that it doesn't warp. I quench it in between 2 aluminum plates. And then after that, it goes through a Cairo process where I'm immersing it in dry ice to get it down to the -90-degree range. After all of that, this is the way the knife comes out. It's just slightly discolored. It's not like high carbon where you get a lot of that black decarbonization. So right out of the heat treat, I can go back over to the grinder. And I'm just going to remove any of the scale. There's really not much there. And I'm going to then start my finish grinding. Now, after you remove any scale that's there, this knife can also be tested for hardness. I use Rockwell hardness files, just a very simple way of testing the hardness on a blade. And I was very pleased to find out that these blades, the stainless steel, AEB-L stainless, hardened right up to about 61 on the Rockwell C scale. So after I confirmed the knife was hard enough, I'm back onto the grinder and I'm using a finer belt. I went to an 80, and then I went to a 120. And really just carefully checking after each pass, trying to get rid of all of those deeper grind marks. Now the original plan, when I grind my knives, most of the time I like to leave some grind marks there. I like to see that on a bevel. Like I said before, this is really my first full flat grind, and it's my first kitchen knife. So when I originally started, I really didn't anticipate how smooth I really wanted to get this. But in thinking about it, processing food, etc., you really want it to be as smooth as possible so that you don't end up with anything, any food parts grabbing on there, etc. Anyway, after I sanded it down to a 120, I then moved vertical onto the same Oregon Blade Maker 2x72 flat platen. I'm just using a magnet to hold that blade. And this is, my version of surface grinding. I don't have a surface grinder, but I'm just going to carefully move this right along the flat platen and polish any of the horizontal grind marks. I think this is about a 220 grit belt. And again, just carefully looking at it every few minutes and polishing it until I get rid of all of those horizontal grind lines. So at this point, it's basically ready for metal etching. Now, I've done a lot of videos on etching. I use self-adhesive vinyl. I cut out the design on a Cameo vinyl cutting machine, a craft cutting machine. The design I designed for this and cut out for this is a Celtic type pattern. And I'm using a car battery charger, 12 volts, 2 amps, piece of angle iron wrapped in gauze that's been saturated in a stainless steel electrolyte solution. And after I've etched the entire area, for probably 2.5 minutes, because I really wanted to kind of deep etch, I'm able to remove that vinyl adhesive and expose the etched design on the blade. Now we're going to move on to the handles. I took this picture before I did the etching, but these handles were made, or this scale material was made by Pete Strafaro from Strafaro Knife Works. I mentioned it before, but it's a woolly mammoth molar pieces embedded in resin. So it's going to be very interesting to see how these come out. Before I started, I glued red liners onto each one of those handle slabs. And now I'm going to clamp them and glue each one individually, pressing it tight up against the bolster with 2-part epoxy. Now I'm not going to show the entire, handle mounting process. I've done this on numerous videos. But basically, I attach one side of the handle at a time, and then I drill holes, right through, and then I cut the remaining material off of the handle with a pin saw. After the handles are mounted and the bolsters are mounted, the pins are peened so that they won't be coming off. And now I'm going to go back over to the 2x72 and start to take down the material. The thickness of the scales is a little bit thicker than the brass bolsters. So I'm really surface grinding these down very carefully, making sure that I don't touch that blade to the belt at all. And I'm just going to bring that material down so that the scale material is level with the bolster. Now I use a angle grinder with a flap sanding wheel, really to do the majority of the shaping on my scales. Most people don't do it this way. They probably use the 2x72 grinder. I just find I have a little bit more control. And I've always done it this way. So I'm taking off little pieces, little little amounts each time. I'm not really laying any weight into this. And then I will continue to sand these scales with a sander, and I'll go from from 80 to 120 to 220, and then eventually I'll bring this over to I'll hand sand it first, 1,000 and 2,000 grit, and then I'll bring it over to the buffing wheel. Before I get there, I'm going to go back over to the grinder. This time I've got a small wheel attachment which slides right into that Oregon Blade Maker chassis, and that allows me to get into all of these little curves on the inside of the handle. So this is the knife with the handle. The handle at this point has been polished. It's ready for final sharpening. I do my sharpening right on the 2x72. Got a fine grit belt. I've slowed down the RPMs and just very, very carefully sharpening each side of that blade. And after this, I will put a leather belt on and strobe it. And if I have to, I can always go to the sharpening stones. The particular design of this knife was drawn by my friend Jason Northgard. The scales were given to me by my friend Pete Strafaro from Strafaro Knife Works. Greatly appreciated. I've never worked with this stuff before. Cuts a little bit harder than wood or other hybrid materials, but grinding and polishing is the same. This is the finished result. So we've got a Celtic Blade Etching AEB-L stainless steel blade, full tang, 2 1/4-inch pins through the handle. The scales are pieces of a woolly mammoth molar embedded in resin. Another look at the Celtic Blade Etching. And if you break it down into each one of the steps, there's nothing really that difficult about making this knife. It's just a matter that it's got a bunch of different steps. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. By all means, check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. We've got a variety of how-to knife making videos there. And please join us on our Facebook group, Knives and Knife Making. Thank you very much.